Hi. So yeah, we're Open Systems Lab. We're a pretty small non-profit based in London. If it would help if I, yeah, that's good. So effectively, and we're working on a project which is basically applying the sort of stuff you guys have been talking about to the domain of planning, which is a very specific, I guess, implementation, and but maybe kind of interesting because it's a kind of there's all the challenges of doing this at a local government scale. It's pretty well known that planning is, you know, a hugely tricky problem in terms of the, if you like, the burden that let me flip over onto here, the burden that dealing with you know, huge numbers of documents and websites, etc., places both on applicants but also on local councils themselves. So the kind of, there's probably an obvious case to all of you about for the value of making that into both machine readable and human readable code. So the kind of obvious sort of public interface expression of this is an interface like this, which is like is what we call a kind of digital planning guide, where effectively you know, users are going through and they're being asked a series of questions, etc. But really this can look like anything, right? So this is just kind of all this is coming through an API, so you can kind of skin this any way you like, or pull this any way in that you want, or kind of write automations on top of these that will answer multiple ones of these questions at once. But what that effectively does is it guides users through to a decision which is flagged around these things. I think, Pierre, you mentioned earlier that thing about edge cases. So that's something that we've sort of tried to build in here, this sort of traffic light outcome system. But the actual problem we're really trying to solve, we kind of only half jokingly describe as this, which is basically in the world, the overlap in the Venn diagram of people who understand and maintain regulations and people who can write code is pretty small. And we see that as one of the core problems here. So the actual kind of key thing that we're doing here, and I'll show you this kind of ugly thing, the thing that's behind this is essentially an interface where non-technical people can essentially be writing regulations as flowcharts, which is something that everybody can understand, and then putting into, at the moment it's just sort of data fields into these, but actually we'll be working towards full kind of logic based things. So really that's the kind of the kind of key move here, to allow these things, you know, allow these things to be updated, and humans, the appropriate authority to be putting in things like policy references, so linking back through to the original policy. For, I think quite a few have talked a bit about that. I guess finally it's just worth pointing out some of the interesting challenges that we have, particularly with the issue of planning that we're confronting. Is we're dealing with that, so we're currently testing that and launching the first versions with a few councils in the UK, particularly Southwark Council. One of the challenges that we have in planning, of course, is the federated nature of regulations. So I didn't show it in the example there, but it's this interesting idea of what we've called shadowing so far, which is where you basically allow local authorities to overwrite national legislation, which is part of how this works. And then the other part, which I would say is finally is kind of to do with the editor thing, is it's really going back to that thing about slow culture change, particularly that this is pertinent because of the edge cases thing that Pia mentioned earlier, which is there's some stuff that is very clear, the rules are very black and white, and there's some things, and particularly in the UK planning system, it's kind of famously sort of, we'll know it when we see it. It leaves a huge amount of room for subjectivity. So actually part of this is actually about creating an interface where planners and local planning authorities feel a sense of comfort and control, that they are in control of the guides and the rules that they are writing, which hopefully makes them more inclined to move towards a rules-based, transparent approach to planning versus the kind of slightly opaque subjective system that we have now. And that is us, really.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.